a point to a lot of the zone 2 training and things. But I think you need to be pushing your body to those limits as well. So that's what I use races for, because it doesn't matter how hard you try during training, you will never push your body to the same level, at least I can't, as you do when you are surrounded by thousands of people who are all racing, and you just get carried away with everybody else, and you get dragged along, and the adrenaline goes through the roof, and that powers you on. But yeah, it was good. I think.
Well, what I love about you, Richard, is you're not trying to be a politician, but I still didn't get the answer. So what was your time?
Oh, the time. Sorry, I didn't. So the time was. So, in regards to the time.
Yeah, how long did it take?
My previous best 10K. Now I've only this year I've began running. So take from this what you will. My previous best was 41:56. Apologies, 40:56. Today I wanted to do a sub 40, but the training hasn't gone my way due to moving premises and work. You guys know, all about working and self-employment. I've been running less than once a week, which isn't enough to train for a PB. I've put on 3 kilograms, and I don't think it's fat. I just think it's water, a little bit of information from trying to fast track the training over the last week, which you're not going to get fit within a week. So, I mean, it was silly really, but I think it was more of a mental thing. So I went in 3K heavier than my last one. I managed a time of 40 minutes, 11 seconds. So just over the 40-minute threshold. So it's a PB. It was a PB for me. So incredibly happy with that, but I didn't get the sub 40. And when I looked at the data after, my heart rate had considerably more to give. So it was more of a mental thing. My brain was telling me that it was hurting too much and to slow down. And when I look at my splits each mile, I was super consistent until mile 5, where I added like 20 or 30 seconds to that mile. And then the last mile, I sped back up. So and that is purely down to mental strength. And that's what the figures are showing. But when you're running, it's difficult to tell the difference between your body's pain and whether you should stop or carry on. Yeah, I chose to give up, I guess, isn't it? But I still PB'd. So, on very little training and carrying more weight and in torrential rain conditions, being bogged down with extra rainwater. So take from that what you will. But I do have a half marathon in 2 weeks, which I've ran 2 half marathons previously. My best time there was 1 hour 33 minutes. So I'm hoping to get a 1 hour 30 in 2 weeks' time. So watch this space.
Nice. Brilliant. Those that are not athletic, PB is not peanut butter. It's a personal best. All right. Personal there are some people out there that aren't sporty, so they wouldn't have known. Right. We've got Dr. Kiltz and Robert. There is a question which I think has been waiting for a long time. Yeah. So do you mind can we dive straight into that one question? I'll put it on the screen.
I'm here cheering.
Yeah, I think it's right up your special street. Aggravator. My wife has been lined up for surgery for endometriosis and adenomyosis. Could keto carnivore avoid such drastic action? She's 3 weeks into keto now for fat loss, but I'm hoping for other benefits. And of course, the proviso is we're not your doctors. We can't be doctors. We can just give you information. So take it away, Dr. Kiltz. What do you think?
I always wonder why we put those little beginnings onto this. I'm not your doctor. And because, it's the same thing in the office. I'm still just giving you advice and it's your decision what to do, but we do it, all of us. And so that's kind of interesting. But so endometriosis and adenomyosis are inflammatory conditions secondary to a plant-based low animal fat diet and eating 3 to 6 meals a day. And so keto is good, but carnivore is awesome and the kick-ass real way to cure it. Again, endometriosis is secondary to intra-abdominal bowel inflammation secondary to plant fermentation and the sugars that flow through your bloodstream and glycation, which we're going to talk about, is the carpet bombing or the Agent Orange that damages your glycocalyx and causes adenomyosis, endometriosis, and all sorts of other disorders of the intra-abdominal pelvic organ systems. And so carnivore in just 2 to 4 weeks will help significantly. And if you go longer and you're patient for it, if you're doing it for pain, you might not need the surgery. Now, if you're doing it for infertility, sometimes there's some reasons to remove scar tissue and surgically remove it. But I often recommend, depending on your age and what other things you're doing, other things going on, that you give it at least 4 to 8 weeks of strict carnivore, fatty meat, salt and water, and 1 meal a day is really the rock solid way if you are inclined to really not do the surgery.
Great. Rich, did you want to add anything, or you quite all right to go on to the next question?
Spot on. Yeah. Happy.
Yeah, good. Sash mode. Hiya, guys. I'm new to carnivore. Please, could you tell me if you eat too much fat, where does the excess fat you eat go? Do you store the excess fat? Many thanks. Dr. Kiltz.
Well, so most people in a standard diet around the globe do not eat fat. They eat very little fat. They might eat a little plant oils, but very little fat. So the majority of amino acids and sugars go to the liver, and in the liver, they're converted to fat via insulin. And of course, they're stored everywhere. When you eat fat, the same thing happens. Your fat is absorbed and through your lymphatics, though, not to your liver, and it's stored everywhere. You can get fat on a fat-only diet or a high-fat carnivore diet or a high-fat anything diet. But in general, for most of us who are in the keto carnivore space, the consumption of fats satiates you quickly. You tend to eat less and you feel better. And so I would say that, again, when you eat fat or you make fat, it goes to all the adipose tissue of the body because that's critical for survival and reproduction.
Yeah, and that's the number of it. It's very hard to overeat fat because it's so satiating, and that's one of the key sort of planks of why carnivore or eating fatty meats is really good for you, because instead of that old way of eat less, move more, and being hungry all the time and thinking about food all the time, you eat fat and animal proteins, and you tend to feel full, and you don't want to keep eating. I mean, it's quite simple, really.
One more comment, if I may, Rich, Stephen. Polar bears eat fat, a tremendous amount of fat, in order to get fat to survive their time without much food or their nesting time. Well, some people might call it hibernation, but it's nesting. So the consumption of fat intentionally in those animals that consume a lot of calories purposefully to get fat. But we purposefully try not to eat calories and get thin. But as you said, eating more fat satiates you, and it drops the calories. You lose them.
Yeah. Thank you very much. A little bit of feedback. Sorry to be so businesslike, guys. Just it's nice to get the feedback from all the early questions. Matthew there, last week he came on. Dr. Kiltz didn't see this, but he mentioned his anterior pelvic tilt problems. Thank you for the great advice. One set of hyperextensions at the end of every weight training workout has already improved my posture and lower back health. So it's glad to be of service. We sort of know what we're talking about. So I'm glad that worked. Right. Now, Richard, you wasn't here at the beginning, but you were much earlier than normal, which is really good. I'm so impressed. So impressed.
Thanks for that.
But Dr. Kiltz, I'm only teasing you, mate. Dr. Kiltz has brought a presentation along. I mean, Robert, do you want to go into that about the glycocalyx?
Yeah. The glycocalyx. I'm going to try to keep it about half an hour if that's okay. And you could break in and depending on how we're going to present this, if you'd like me to go ahead and share.
Yeah.
So let's see. Yeah, you can, if you can invite my screen in.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. And let's see if I do anything to that. Give me 1 second. I think if I just go from the beginning, is that going to still allow us? Yeah. There we go. Okay. All right. All right. The glycocalyx and beyond. And the real question I've always had is, what is sugar for in our body? And my sister died of diabetes, and I know that sugar is damaging to all of us. And I believe that it turns out that fat is the energy for our body, for the mitochondria. Well, then if sugar isn't the energy, then what's it for? And this is where I've learned about the glycocalyx. Now, let me see how can I make sure to change the slide. I think I want to be here. Can you still see me clearly?
Yeah, I can see the slide.
Good. Okay, good. Because in order for me to change the slides, I got to look at this part of it. But essentially, the world without sugar, without plants, would be desolate, and no life would exist. So we know that life requires plants, and it's for structure and it's for communication. I mean, basically, our environment and the land is full of plants, and if you decimate it and remove it, erosion and destruction happens, which happens in our body technically because there's this layer within our body of plants or sugars, which is called the glycocalyx. And so just like these M&Ms, which are coated with, and it protects the chocolate and the peanut, or the Teflon pan, when you destroy the coating, things stick to it. But it's not just for preventing things from sticking, but there's also the structure, like a plant in the cellulose or the other plants in algae. But interesting enough, the DNA of our bodies contain sugars. The keratin, which is the outer coating of our skin, contains sugars, and without it, it would be exposed just like this Teflon pan and would not allow things to get through, allows things to get through easily. So silk, collagen, and chitin and other forms that are able to break through this sugar layer. But there's a functionality sugars that I think we're all missing and not understanding. The majority, and it took me a while to figure this out, but basically plants and animals contain amino acids, simple sugars, and fatty acids, by the way. The majority of plants break down to sugars, and amino acids and the sugars must go to the liver where they're converted to fat via insulin. As the liver cells get damaged, sugar and amino acids rise and insulin rises. So I think the liver is the cause of insulin resistance, and we'll talk about that another time. But basically, the fat stores provide the mitochondrial acetyl-CoA, and when you eat fat, it goes to the lymphatics, and it's basically stored there in order to provide the energy for the mitochondria. But it also provides the building blocks, because adipose tissue contains amino acids, sugars, and fatty acids, which are the building blocks for every organism in the body. A plant-based diet, we know, causes a tremendous amount of inflammation, and it's mostly sugars. Well, but sugars are energy, and so we're supposed to eat a lot of sugar to keep our metabolism moving and keep running and making great strides and improving personal bests for Richard and all of us. But most people don't know any of the cell membrane, the phospholipid bilayer, which is surrounds every cell of our body, including the nucleus, the mitochondria, the red blood cells, white blood cells, and all of them. But there are these sugars that are hanging on to either the lipid part or the protein part. And these sugars are critical for the regulatory, structural, and communication of every entity of our body. So the glycobiome is how the body interacts with the environment. And here's a picture of a protein in its globular three-dimensional function with these sugars. So the different colors represent monosaccharides, but they're linked and make a polysaccharide, which is called a glycan, which is like a barcode that says who I am and what I am. It elicits inflammation. It links to a sperm, an egg, an embryo, to the uterus, and it creates every biologic function of our body. And we damage these things because we're consuming a plant-based diet. But if you dissect a blood vessel, a lymphatic vessel, you'll see this surrounding cell has this grass growing all around it, and here this glycocalyx is basically a saccharide or sugar layer. Let me go back. I wanted to go back another slide. And around these sugar-coated cells are these saccharide layers called the glycocalyx, just like we see in these glycoproteins and glycan sugars. And if you want to butt in with any questions, I'm easy to go on that, by the way. So every structure of our body is built of sugars more than we even realize, because without them, there's no structure or rigidity to the system, nor can they communicate with every other system of our body. So the bones, the muscles, the blood vessels, the nerves and the lymphatics all contain this glycocalyx layer that's basically communicates and keeps things in or out as they're supposed to. So the cell wall is a polysaccharide, when I say polysaccharide, but a phospholipid bilayer, like down at the bottom left here. But it's got these proteins that are bound within them. But most of us have never heard of the sugars that are critical for the normal function of this bilayer. And below the membrane, you can see these other fibers, and these are sugar strands like the branches of a tree, the roots of a tree, that act for structural and communication purposes. And you can see it in a little larger picture here, where you see the larger blue transmembrane proteins with these sugars attached to them, which are the barcodes that basically communicate with those things that are flowing or prevent sticking to these membranes. Now, we all know about glucose, seems to be the only sugar in our body, but there are nine primary N-acetyl glucosamine, galactose, N-acetyl D-galactosamine, mannose, xylose, glucuronic acid, fucose, and sialic acid, which is N-acetyluramic acid, is another one. And so the way these are sort of pictured, this one line here on the left picture is the membrane, and then the sugars branch out from that. And so think of the amino acids to produce proteins, but the glycans glycosylate or normally are bound to these proteins and lipids, which give it its proper function and identity. It gives it its proper three-dimensional structure and charge, pH, and I mentioned the three-dimensional structure. So the DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, has sugars. They're bound there. Without them, our body doesn't function normally. The RNA then tells the ribosomes to make proteins. But this post-translational function of adding these sugars, the glycobiome, the sugars, which creates the glycocalyx. And again, these tell the environment and manipulate the environment and how it all interacts. So the endoplasmic reticulum on this right side, I think you're seeing on the right, that's what I see it as. The ribosomes make the proteins, which then are glycosylated. And we'll talk about glycation, which is the abnormal binding of sugars, which damage the glycans or the glycoproteins, which make them dysfunctional. So they're either added to the cytoplasm or the cell wall, where they're placed into the interstitial spaces or the circulation to do its business at other parts of the body. Yeast, insects, non-human mammals, and plants all have different barcodes. And this is one of the reasons we have our allergic, have foreign antigens, which our body says stay out. And that elicits an immunologic reaction. And so humans have a lot of sialic acid, which are the purple triangles. And so it says come in or stay out. Now, this can be very, very complicated science, and we'll try to keep it as simple and as reasonably efficient as possible. But this science is really only about 20 years old. Carolyn Bertozzi just received a Nobel Prize for it, but basically under normal methods of microscopic evaluation of a cell wall, all of this is dissolved and you can't see it. So newer methods were needed for us to be able to see this, but basically it is the barcode of every system, and even cancer cells or invading microbes use this to hide from our immune system. And basically here you see in the cytoplasm is the mitochondria on the right, and the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus. And these are critical for the polypeptides or the protein chains. But then you have all these sugars that are added. That's called glycosylation. So heart disease, cardiovascular disease, blood clots, and stroke are all secondary to the breakdown of this layer, which is sugar. And if you're consuming a lot of sugars, plant sugars, or amino acids, which all convert to sugars, by the way, they damage this layer. And once it's damaged, it allows the blood components, the platelets and the plasma proteins and other erythrocytes to stick to it, ultimately causing damage and a heart attack or stroke or other damage. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So the viruses, by the way, coronavirus, every viral modification or mutation is a change in the sugars on the outer spike proteins. So those sugars change in order to get past the immune system. But these sugars from the virus, bacteria, and yeast are able to attach to the cells, change the sugars, and then get in and modify all of the other systems that are there to prevent that from happening, because these are really smart molecules that know how to take us down and use us. But our DNA has these polymers that are changed over time that probably are the reason for evolutionary change to organisms. So it's not the ATGC, but it's the sugars that then affect the epigenetic expression of those DNA molecules. So keratin, heparin, dermatan sulfate, chondroitin sulfate, we've all heard of most of these, but our skin, our hair, our nails all require grains of the cell walls in order to properly function, protection, or other means like reproduction. So structural, lubricants, transport, immunologic, hormones, HCG, AMH, TSH, these are all critical, and they're damaged secondary to high exposure to other organisms, glycans, plants, microbes, and all of these antigens affect our glycobiome and cause more breakdown and thus inflammation. So antifreeze, cell recognition for sperm and egg interactions. So think of glycooxidation. So glycosylation is the normal binding of sugars by the body naturally. It has the glycotransferases and enzymes to do that. And by the way, the majority of these are not determined by the genetic structure. There's other epigenetic factors that determine these. But I equate it to either a bombing raid or spraying of Agent Orange to cause glycation, which damages the outer coating of the cells and causes rust and damage. And all the diseases we suffer from our mouth, our teeth, our vessels, eyes, joints, colon, breast, lungs, every disease we have. And by the way, I do not believe that obesity is a disease. It's a sign and a reason why or how you got to where you're at, because you're a high plant-based eater. But plant antigens, plant glucose, plant chemicals, fermentation, auto-intoxication, very common problem. And I believe excessive exercise. But again, that's why when we'll talk more about that in another way. But garden from breaking down and more erosion and inflammation. And there's a whole science of N-glycans, O-glycans, and more. But think of these monosaccharides as critical for the function of every cell and organ system of your body. Leaky gut, breakdown in your vessels. This mucopolysaccharide layer is made up of glycans, sugars attached to proteins or lipids that keep the microbes and other antigens like lectins, oxalates, and phytates out. When this breaks down due to an excessive consumption of plant-based diet, you cause a leaky gut. Things get in, things get out. They get into the vessels, the lymphatics, and they cause every disease you and I suffer from. A nice picture where you can see a epithelial cell. It could be of the lymph system. It could be of the peritoneal system, arteries, veins. Any tubular structure has this epithelial system, which has these glycolipids and glycophospholipids that bind to the sugars, which make up the glycocalyx. And there are many, many, many of these, and the science is really radical, amazing, and very detailed. And they're using it for the COVID vaccines, for cancer therapy today. You name it, it's trying to be specific to your glycobiome and seeing whether or not we can identify these sugars and create a targeted treatment. When the glycocalyx is damaged, normally the vessels, the blood flows through a straightforward motion, but it creates the phospholipid membrane and causes more damage and disease. So endometriosis, adenomyosis, bowel disorders, irritable bowel syndrome, they're all related because they're all related to breakdown of the glycocalyx, and which basically now allows the immune system to come in there and try to repair these areas. But it's the constant daily exposure since the day you're born to the day you die of these proteins, which are foreign to our body in any significance and frequency. That's why one of the things I focus on is, rather than all the blood testing, I ask the question of what you're eating and focus on diet as much as anything else. But there are these mucins, which are made up of these glycoproteins, which have negative charges, which bind to the positive charged particles, lectins, oxalates, phytates, and microbes, and works its way to try to keep them out of the epithelial layer. But because we're chronically exposed and or our mucus layer is chronically damaged, we're doomed to have a significant increased risk of death and damage to things like the COVID virus, the flu virus, and more. Okay, our antibodies are glycoproteins. They contain these sugars bound to the proteins, which are critical in order to tag these foreign particles or tag the cancer cells. But they're damaged due to a plant-based lean meat diet and 3 to 6 meals a day, which is basically killing us. Now, why some people and not others, it's probably related to their glycobiome mix and their glycocalyx, their barcode, that they're able to tolerate some things better than others. That says good sperm, bad sperm, right sperm, wrong sperm, right embryo, right egg, and all those things are really the same thing. So the glycocalyx is damaged because we're glycation and oxidation combined, which will damage the egg, sperm, the embryo, and the implantation environment. And the same thing with endometriosis and adenomyosis. And basically, plant sugars glycate. And think of them as the rust blends, a plant-based lean meat, no red meat, and wine for a pregnant and lactating woman. And by the way, healthy fats, which we call seed oils and avocado. Ages and rages, we've all heard of these things. Advanced glycation end products and receptors for advanced glycation end products, which are basically damaged secondary to plant sugars and protein, amino acids, which all act as sugar, by the way, in an excessive amount, which damage our glycocalyx, which ultimately lead to reactive oxygen species, inflammation, metabolic and structural damage, which lead to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, kidney disease, Alzheimer's, sarcopenia, rheumatoid arthritis, just name the infinite thousands of diseases that we all label in this business. Glycosylation, glycome, it's the complete repertoire. So all of the sugars and the glycoconjugates composed of carbohydrates or sugars attached to the lipids or the proteins. Its synthesis is dependent on the local environment of enzymes, sugars, precursors, and organelle structures. So when we damage it by the wrong environment, plant-based, low animal fat, and other environments, alcohol, drugs, or negativity and worry and all those things, and stress or excessive exercise could affect this because of increased temperatures to some people more than others. So local changes in glycosylation, local epigenetic factors modulate our immune responses, which enable the viral immune escape, promote cancer cell metastases, or regulate or disrupt apoptosis. So the actual composition of the glycome affects all cellular function. The glycocalyx, I think of it like the Teflon shield, is essential for the maintenance of every cell membrane and every cell and organ system of our body, and without it, we are dead. Carpet bombing or Agent Orange. So glycation. So again, the opposite of glycosylation. Glycosylation is the normal binding of sugars. Glycation is the abnormal binding of sugars. Think of glycosylation, health and wellness, but we overwhelm the body with glycation. A process that occurs in all living cells is the process of excess sugar molecules attached to lipids or protein molecules, forming advanced glycation end products. Ages have been compared to rust in a car. Just like car develops corrosion when exposed to too much water and salt, our cells will experience a buildup of cellular debris in the form of ages if we overeat, overconsume, or eat the wrong thing, even in small amounts. That's why I'm against fruit or honey in any frequent or significant amounts. Glycation can damage collagen, elastin, make them stiff and brittle, and all the things we suffer as you get into your 60s and 70s. It's damaging. Aging of the skin, which causes a rough, callous texture, which we see so commonly. Brown marks, cafe au lait spots. It's involved in diabetes, secondary complications associated with metabolic disorders, including cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, and nephropathies. And the glycation damage to the liver causes insulin resistance. So the simple flow of life. The sun and carbon dioxide make a long-chain carbon particle in a photosynthesizing cells. We can eat them, but the best way to eat them is eat the meat, the animals that eat the grasses, and ultimately we're the lions. But excessive consumption of plants will kill us, unfortunately, and cause many diseases. Interesting enough, if you feed a cow fat, it kills the cow because it kills the microbes in the gut, which ultimately they require in order to digest the plants. But we do not need the microbes in the gut, and I believe the microbes are deadly for us in any significance and frequency. And the fruit and fiber and vegetables, ultimately, to a lion makes them a cat, or a wolf makes them a dog. We do not need to consume plant sugars as energy. It is not, by the way. It's indirectly must be converted to fat via insulin in the liver. It's regulatory signaling, cell-to-cell recognition or rejection, translation of environmental cues for the organism to flourish or flounder. And eat the meat, be the master. Eat the mush, be weak and meek. And we are the lions. And I'm going to leave it at that. And one of the things I've always said is we make science complicated, and that was a little complicated in some areas, but like the M&M or the Teflon shield, the sugars are critical. And all things being equal, the simple answer is the one. And if we stick to thinking simplicity, and carnivore is like so simple and easy, it's fatty meat, salt water, and enjoy life every day. So thank you for allowing me to share that.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And I can see in the comments, people think it's fascinating and beautifully explained. Someone said they're late, but they're ready for the lecture. So, yeah, it's really good. That was great. Rich, you're very interested in this. Do you have any questions that have sprung to mind?
No, that was fantastic. I think Dr. Kiltz has eloquently covered sort of everything in depth and in basic terms. A few things sprung to mind when you were talking there in regards to feeding a cow fat and feeding these other animals other things. And I instantly recalled when I was younger, whenever my dog was ill, he would eat grass to make himself sick. And that's what I think of. We are that carnivore. We are the dog. We shouldn't be eating these plants. And a lot of my journey until the last 4 years was heavily plant-based. I was ketogenic. I saw massive improvements. And this is another thing that people will quite often say to me, I've been living keto for X amount of years and I'm absolutely flourishing even. And that's great. That's because you've taken away all of these other toxic foods. So you are fit and healthy in spite of, not because of. So you are consuming a lot more animal proteins, healthier fats. But yes, you're consuming veg, but the veg is not contributing to your health and well-being. And I would argue the fact that it is slowing your progression down. Some people can go through life and they can maintain that and be fit and healthy. But it's up to that individual to decide where on this sort of sliding scale that they sit. But I'm carnivore. Steve's got the three of us are carnivore. And I think this is the creme de la creme. This is the pinnacle of health and well-being. But I'm a supporter of all avenues of this because I didn't wake up yesterday and decide I was going to become a carnivore. Yet I'm a massive meat lover. But I never once thought that I would ever just be eating meat, eggs, fish, cheese. It took me a long time through education because we are told that these vegetables are highly nutrient dense, and they're not. We're told that they are essential for life, and they're not. We're told a carbohydrate is essential for life. We think that there is magical, mythical compounds within these fruits and vegetables, antioxidants. An antioxidant in a food term is predominantly a myth. And I say that because this antioxidant effect isn't actually an antioxidant effect. It's a pro-oxidant effect. It actually creates or begins its journey as a pro-oxidant, and it activates something called the NRF2 pathway, which is an oxidative stress pathway. A response to this is an elevation in glutathione, and this is which is the body's master antioxidant. And this is what the scientists are seeing is this elevation, and they're thinking this magical compound is giving us all of this amazing benefit, but it is doing this in order to conjugate a toxin to excrete it from the body. But they will argue that this is hormesis. But true hormesis, through my research, comes from two things. Environmental hormesis in regards to cold water therapy, heat therapy, all that sort of stuff. And a compound called astaxanthin, which comes from salmon. It's what gives salmon the pink color. But we're back to eating animal proteins again. Plants do not contain. Now, astaxanthin is the only carotenoid that does not begin its journey as a pro-oxidant. So the only true antioxidant that I can see that exists in human form, as far as what people are calling an antioxidant, comes from animal proteins. These antioxidants do not exist in meats. They are not these magical unicorn compounds that are there to heal and repair the body. They do nothing, in my opinion, but cause damage. But if you need to keep a little bit of that in order to sustain. So this is a question that somebody said to me the other day. I want to be carnivore. I want to reap all of these benefits, these brilliant benefits that you guys speak about all the time. But I'm struggling. I find my food bland, and I do like eating veg. So my answer to that was, you're better off eating a little bit than falling off the wagon and getting back on the carb train and this processed food train. So the advice that I tend to give is to look at your plate, and I would structure. Now, our plate is 100% animal proteins with fat, because every cell in the body is made of fat and protein. But we are told, like in the UK, we have the Eat Well plate. 3/4 of that Eat Well plate is vegetables and grains, with 1/4 being protein. So I tell them to turn this the other way around, physically fill your plate with animal proteins, and if you want the veg, put a tiny little portion in. It's not serving you. It's not causing. It's not serving you any benefit, but at least a little bit is keeping you on that straight and narrow. So I think it's up to people to see what works best for them in regards to what type of foods they eat and what lifestyle they live. But that presentation basically it explains everything, because there's a big miscommunication in regards to glycation and glycosylation. And yeah, I think you explained that incredibly well. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. And
Thank you.
as you can see in my name, I've got an honours science degree, and I'm going to not add any science. I'm going to add a little anecdote from today, which I'd like to just tell you about. I went out for a meal today, and I wasn't 100% carnivore. It was Jane's parents' 40th anniversary. Okay,
Wow.
and when we go out for a meal with them, they're normally okay with me being carnivore, but today I said, I'm just going to go with whatever is happening, because they're 40 years. I'm just going to eat stuff. There is a kicker to this, which is very low, taking the level down a little bit, but I'll tell you what happened. So anyway, I went out and I had a whole lamb shank, because I'm still carnivore, but I had a small serving of leeks in cheese, and I've not had gas for months and months and months. But this afternoon has been horrendous. and that's my body saying, we didn't like this. You shouldn't be gassy. You shouldn't be bloated. I mean, I muted my mic, and even in Robert's presentation there twice, it thought I wanted to speak. It was telling me my mic is muted. And that's how bad it is. So my body is just giving me a verbal signal that, we didn't like this. We did not like this. And I can guarantee it was the leeks, because everything else I eat and I don't get gas. So
Yeah.
sorry to bring it down a couple of pegs, but that's what happened.
Do you know what I'd add to that as well?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Kels, go on.
Oh, I was going to say I did the same thing just the other day with my partner. It was a special event, and it was like, okay, I had a little bit, and literally yesterday not the day next day, it was the day. Wait a second. No, it was the next day. I was sick as can be. And I was like, but, and I was like, okay, I'll have a little bit. And I tried, I moved away the things I know were going to be deadly. But this is the interesting part of life. And being a strict carnivore doesn't mean you're never going to get sick either, by the way, but it certainly helps reduce it. But we all do it from time to time.
We've got a couple of questions, if you guys don't mind. Leonardo, I wonder if that's Leonardo da Vinci. Anyway, right. Is red meat generally higher in advanced glycation end products than plant foods? If so, is it of less concern on carnivore because less dietary sugar means less opportunity for glycation?
May I start with that? I guess, is that all right? Well, so proteins break down amino acids, which convert to mostly sugar in the liver. And so our body isn't making a bunch of proteins, and we have plenty of amino acids circulating anyway. But so I think it's the sugars from the proteins which can contribute to the glycation problems of the body, because we know that amino acids require insulin in order to convert them to fat. So I don't think there are more in meat. I think there are probably less in meat. But as you saw, each of the meats, chicken, lamb, goat, bison, elk, beef, contains their own barcode that some people are going to have a little bit more of an antigenic reaction to it than others. And for some people, dry aged meat may contain a little bit more of those antigenic components we'll call ages and rages and those sort of things. I mean, I think the science is, again, it sounds good, but I think that for some people, beef could be a problem and they need to work towards lamb. And it sounds like Richard likes lamb, or Stephen, but I also like lamb, and I think I do really well with it. And one One other thing I just want to mention, because Richard said this about, I think it's the fat. Interesting about the salmon eggs, it's a combination of the proteins, but it's the fat, because they have a lot of fat. And it's the thing about the cows. Why did the cows die? Because the fat killed all the microbes in their gut. And so when you eat fat, it's the most antimicrobial you can ever do to kill the microbes in our gut. And, all of our diseases are mostly related to microbial overgrowth.
And that's great. And can I just also add that Ivor Cummins did a fantastic thing about the glycocalyx about 4 or 5 years ago. So very advanced, and he did some brilliant slides, very similar to Robert's, but he had the glycocalyx on a slide, and they were able to show that it was all fluffy like the grass, and then when you had carbohydrates, it just flattened.
Yep.
And it was showing that had the biggest effect on the glycocalyx. And we've only got a certain amount of time. I'd like to get to one other question, as we've got these great people bothering to turn up and watch. Crypto Carnivore has got this question: on the lion diet for 9 months, well done, only going poop every 3 to 7 days, stomach cramps day I go, then end up getting at least 4 times in hours with urgency. Any suggestion? So basically, what he's saying, it doesn't poop, but then when he does, or she, the stomach cramps happen, and ends up going at least 4 times in hours with urgency. So that's an evacuation that's happening. I mean, this is the thing. When you are eating this way, there's not much waste being produced, but there's always going to be some waste, and you've got a transit time as you absorb that food. So you're going to get a period of time where there will be some waste, and 3 to 7 days is not uncommon. If you're very strict, if you're lion, that I've heard that many times. For the stomach cramps, that could be electrolytes. You could be a little bit dehydrated. What do you think, Rich? Because you tend to get into this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, 9 months, believe it or not, I don't believe is an awful long time. I've known people to take an awful lot longer to adapt. As Dr. Kiltz, mentioned earlier, the whole gut microbiome takes an awful lot. We are what we eat. And this is why the cow dies when you feed it something that the gut microbes can't process. We are coming from this environment of feeding rubbish to our gut, and then we start feeding it a foreign body, in essence, and the gut microbes don't know how to process, and it can cause all sorts of issues. So, I mean, 9 months to me doesn't seem like an awful long time. There could be other factors in regards to this as well. I mean, maybe the cuts are too fatty, and the bile production hasn't upregulated, so there could be a bile issue. There could be a salt issue, as you say. Maybe the source of meat isn't good. Again, Dr. Kiltz mentioned aged meats. Aged meats become oxidized in the same way that vegetable oils do over time, so they can cause issues within the body. Are you getting it from the shop, or is it farm bought? Because a lot of shop bought meats are injected with nasty toxins and antibiotics. So there's a whole myriad of unanswered questions, I think, there. But and some people, I think, again, Dr. Kiltz mentioned this, some people do better with lamb. So it could be a case of maybe trying a different cut, for example. Now, the interesting thing there, these blood tests that they give, you can use to see what foods that you are allergic to. Now, I've done 4 of these previously. That's 3, but I thought show the 3 fingers, but it's 4. Every one of these gave me a different result. So this is why I think they're a complete load of rubbish. And 2 out of these 4 said to me that red meat does not work well in my body. I eat red meat now every day, and I am the healthiest and fittest that I have ever been. But for anybody else who had taken that advice on board, they could be removing one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet from their diet. But I just thought, interesting fact that I thought I'd add in there. But yeah.
Healthiest.
Dr. Kultz, I think you were looking at some slides there. Did you have something?
Oh no, I was just trying to find the slide where it showed the breakdown. So the one slide again, the leaky gut, it's the breakdown of the glycocalyx. So when the glycocalyx has been destroyed, that's when disease happens. So it was just us. It wasn't the original the slide. So I was just seeing if I could show it to you, but
Do you want me to add it?
No.
No.
It's good. I didn't have the one that I think that I was looking for, but it really is. Just again, it's back to when the forest is deforested, the erosion happens, and that's all disease. So think of the forest and the garden as the glycocalyx. Without it, life does not exist.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's really just so simple. We do contain a sugar layer. That's why glucose is in our body. But it's just another one of the glycans or the monosaccharides to provide for the glycocalyx. It's nothing special more than any of those other sugars that I mentioned. But we keep on focusing on it because if you think about diabetes type 2, and my sister died of this again, we focus on giving diabetics sugar and giving them a drug to lower it, when we know that it's never required in the human diet. So we're actually causing the diseases. We're not willing to go out there and say, no, wait a minute, you're destroying the glycocalyx by giving your body. It's like if I fed you bacteria, yeast, and viruses in a cup every day. And remember, probiotics to me are the deadliest thing. But if I said, here's a cup of yeast and viruses for you to drink every day, and you got sick, and I'd say, just unlucky. But in fact, it's not luck. It's our inability to see through. And modern medicine, and you talk about this all the time, and both you, Richard, and Stephen, how important it is that modern medicine, and we are taking over in the sense of sharing the story, because the doctors are not doing it, and science is not doing it either. The simplicity of the story is remove the plants of any significance. But as you, Stephen, and myself, a little bit of carbs were really got to us. But if you focus on fatty meat, you'll be healthier than ever.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I mean, coming off the back of that, when Stephen mentioned, and the two of you that, you now and again indulge in non-sort of carnivore foods, and we all get shot down for it, but we're all only human. The difference is that we have healed our gut. So through living the lifestyle, our enterocytes are intact. Our glycocalyx is intact. We can afford to put some of these compounds in now and again. But that reaction that Stephen mentioned, which is so severe that other people will say, well, that doesn't happen to me. Now, this is the reason for this is if you were to drink alcohol for the first time, then that alcohol would knock you for six. One beer or one glass of wine. The next time you can drink more. The next time it's more again. It doesn't mean that beer or that alcohol is not causing the damage. It's just your ability to recognize it is diminished. But what happens now is that now we've healed the gut. We put these foods back in and we now get what's called an exaggerated response. The second we put these toxins in, the alarm bells ring and the body says, whoa, what are you doing? I don't want this crap back in. Take it back out. But the difference is for us, our gut is intact. We are no longer suffering with this leaky gut. And we can afford to put it in now and again. So life isn't over when you are carnivore. Being strict carnivore, fantastic. But it doesn't mean that you have to be in regards to those situations, Steve, as you say, where you feel sort of under pressure a little bit. We can afford to do those things. It's when you are constantly causing this barragement to the glycocalyx continuously. And as you mentioned earlier, all autoimmune disease comes from leaky gut through a process called molecular mimicry. Every autoimmune, whether it's caused through casein in certain milks or whether it's wheat germ agglutinin or phytohemagglutinin, all of these come from leaky gut through that process.
But it also comes from, if you think about it, like a bee sting or a bite that breaks through that glycocalyx layer. So some things are able to get through the glycocalyx layer, even though we have an intact glycocalyx. And it's those antigens. So just think of all the other molecules. Every molecule of every other organism has a barcode that might say friend or foe. And I think that's the part, for me, I have a pretty good glycocalyx, but There's going to be something that's going to break it down. And interesting enough, you might consume something that might locally break it down, maybe some alcohol or something you ate that happens to be able to break down the glycocalyx in that small area, like a bee sting or a bite or something like that.
Yeah. And just to tag on to the end of that, I mean, you mentioned a certain virus, a few times within that talk. An interesting thing, Ed, is that, yeah, I'll try not to swear.
Hang on a minute, Richard, because I've got to interject here just for a second, and I'm not trying to shut you down. But as you know, YouTube are not happy with anyone not aligning with the WHO, and they're actually moving all of our videos over. This is a beautiful time to say this, because the next hour is not on YouTube, it's on Rumble. Okay, and in the comments I put a link for anyone that wants to listen to the rest of the conversation. Just go to Rumble. If you did it last week, which you did in your droves, which was incredibly good,
are we not meant to mention that word? I thought we were using Grumble.
I'm not really, but I'm telling people that now. So, yes, I did let that slip. We're going to go over 8 o'clock. Now, to Dr. Kiltz, I didn't know he was going to be generous and offer us maybe 2 hours. So I've sent him the link to the studio over on, the other channel, which I should have been saying. So we could probably go into more detail there. And so I want to thank the people on YouTube, which is great for this first hour. And we're going to go over to the other platform and carry on this conversation. I'd really like you to join us over there. Like I say, it was amazing because the first week we tried that experiment, we had 100 people straight away join, and then last week it was 200. So we're trying to sort of be as free and open as possible, and that's what we're going to do. So we'll wrap up here. And we'll go over to there, and hopefully everyone can join us. If you look in the comments, my link tree link, you go on that, and the top link will take you to the next hour. So that's what we're going to do. All right. So hopefully we'll see everybody. Dr. Kiltz has given us the thumb up. Richard Smith, will you be there, or will you wait 10 minutes before you turn up? What's going on?
I was 1 minute late. In fact, I'm sure I was on time. I'm sure I was exactly on the button. I will be there.
Right.
I'll be there.
Okay, right. So, well, I'm going to end this stream, and then we'll restart on the other platform.
Fantastic. Thank you all.
Cheers to everyone. See you in a minute.